Following one sarcastic, headstrong reporter as he tries to find the truth behind the paranormal and convince his equally brash editor to let him put it in print, Kolchak the Night Stalker made it to Blu-ray just a minute ago. And as a longtime series fan, I thought I'd do the HorrorFam a little solid and give you a top-to-bottom ranking of every episode. Which, as there were only 20 episodes produced, was a pretty cut-and-dry task. In my last video, I covered the 10 episodes of Kolchak I consider to be below average, and in this video, I'll be counting down the 10 I find to be above average. The episodes that highlight the early influence it had in ushering a more hard-boiled breed of supernatural horror to the small screen, and showcase why Carl Kolchak, who his co-workers and contacts alike could honestly refer to as an annoyance or even a jerk, is such a distinctly unforgettable protagonist even more than 50 years later. If you're really familiar with the series, then you probably already know what the top 2 or 3 episodes are gonna be. In any case, sit back and enjoy Talk Horror's top 10 episodes of Kolchak the Night Stalker. Number 10, The Nightly Murders. This is the only representative from the last 5 episodes of Night Stalker that is going to make the cut here. It's the last real by-the-numbers Kolchak story featuring nightly murders being committed by a haunted suit of armor, the original villain in horror literature. This is not on the list because it's a massive twist on the formula, but more because it's the formula's crystallization. The quintessential filler adventure you can enjoy without something like a rushed ending or a poor costume standing in the way. The worst thing about it is how on the nose that title is, because the killer and the filler here are both solid. The ghostly knight committing the murders looks decent in motion, carries an intimidating physical presence, and you can hear the heavy sound of his approach well before he finds you, which makes for more than one scene of foreboding suspense.
What is that noise?
He kills with a variety of weapons like a medieval-themed slasher, and does so often enough to keep the plot moving along at an entertaining pace. When he's not, you are watching Kolchak match wits with the cop whose personality is so bizarre it actually confounds him.
You're lazy. Police work bores you. Those long, thoughtful pauses of yours, you're not thinking, you're sleeping. That's what you're doing, you're sleeping.
And his banter with Vincenzo makes it feel like they're both at their most done with one another.
I saw my sister-in-law have a nervous breakdown, and it was messy. Now, I recognized all the symptoms, Carl. Oh, fantasy, the inability to concentrate on real issues.
Yeah, well, it probably runs in the family, Tony.
This is also the rare supernatural story from Kolchak that makes its own lore, which helps the nightly murders feel truly original to the series. Number 9, Chopper. This episode is infamous amongst fans of the series, specifically for having the worst effects of any Night Stalker episode. Take one look at the monster and you will agree, but then take one look at the monster and it is the exact sort of design that makes this series worth revisiting. This episode is, in fact, about a phantom biker riding a 1950s chopper while wielding a katana, out for blood against the former gangmates who decapitated him. Even with the chest the height of Herman Munster, making the arms look smaller than a T-Rex's, this is hardcore. Even when we end on freeze frames that tell on the production, it's hardcore. The fact that they attempted half of this shit without the benefits of green screen is hardcore. Because on Kolchak's budget, it could have looked 100 times worse. The whole concept of a headless horseman on a motorbike swinging his sword with superhuman velocity is one that I am just glad exists. And you can thank Robert Zemeckis for this, because it is his first big writing credit, and there are shades of his energy all over it. When the gang are all boo-hooing one another and Kolchak's being extra cautious in interviewing them, and when Kolchak cons an arrogant detective out of information by making up a story so brazenly improbable that it riles him into contradicting it.
He was worth $8 million, that's somebody. Morton ran away from home when he was about 14 years old, lived with a couple in Cicero. But the Morton family knew where he was all the time.
And they let him join the Jokers, a punk bike gang, boozing, girls, breaking store windows, huh?
And if that's not enough, Chopper is the second and final time we see Kolchak rescue his hat like Indy. Number 8. The Ripper. Our introduction to Kolchak in its abridged runtime, The Ripper gives us a good crash course on Kolchak's personality, and feels very much like a third installment of the TV movies The Night Stalker and Night Strangler. I would honestly say it's more memorable and creepy than the original. Just trade the vampire for an inexplicably immortal and seemingly impossible to capture Jack the Ripper, who has been playing his own copycat as the years go on.
Now, he wrote the same thing in London, and then he struck the night before in exactly the same place.
Yeah, Kolchak. But that was the real Jack the Ripper.
The Ripper is truly made to feel like an enigma in this episode. We never hear him speak, and while he seems to be intelligent and poised to a fault, his twisted words, strange Achilles heel, and total monomania make you wonder whether he's just a freak of nature or something demonic in origin. By contrast, we're introduced to Carl Kolchak as a very human and fallible sort of protagonist, possessing eternal determination, but just as often channeling that into shirking his less exciting duties as unveiling the truth. From going AWOL after being assigned to write Dear Emily for an absent Mrs. Cowles, whose actress debuts here as one of her own faithful writers, to getting busted for the wrong choice of words to an undercover cop, to a surprising moment of panic when finally faced with the eternal maniac at arm's length. The Ripper plays it all with a skillful, even pace that affords each scene room to communicate everything it wants to.
Dear Emily, since I last wrote you, the man across from me at the south end of Wilton Park has come back. He is up to his old tricks, prowling around nights in that foolish costume and looking right through me with his X-ray eyes.
Number 7. Mr. Ring. With no disrespect intended to previous entries, this is where you start seeing the truly influential side of Kolchak the Night Stalker. Unlike any other episode, Mr. Ring opens into a bleak conspiratorial mood, with Kolchak staggering into the office, having been freshly released from captivity following an ordeal of druggings by government interrogators, struggling to hang on to the story he's just lived from the beginning. One in which a thinking android's new military programming enables it to commit murder in order to miss its own date with termination, to escape and to try to become human. Mr. Ring is a race against time, not as we may expect to stop the android before it goes too far, but to stop us before we can destroy a being that's much like ourselves. And most of the unnerving imagery Ring delivers merely stems from the uncanniness of his attempts to seem human.
You don't need this.
This is a lower octane entry of Kolchak, and a lot of what makes it good just comes from the sense of intrigue that stems from how the case leaves him hard up for reliable sources of information, at one point interviewing the same subject twice, and gaining a bit of extra knowledge thanks to her being sober the second time.
Dumb me, forced to attend. It was microcircuitry, stress patterns, functional abilities, and
Siliconized limb plates, intelligence programming, and joint malleability.
All right, enough.
When Kolchak finally meets Ring and its surviving creator, he's given the chance to interview the android. And Kolchak does not serve its softballs either, starting with academic inquiries to suss out that he's talking to the real deal, and then plunging into questions more liable to touch a nerve.
Who had the greater right to life? You or Dr. Avery Walker?
Number 6. The Vampire. The vampire of the title is implied to have been a victim turned by Janos Skorzeny from the original Night Stalker TV movie, in the only time a Kolchak episode references prior continuity. The episode pretty much stands on its own, and not a whole lot is made of the vampire Catherine's origins, but it's still got to have been cool for anyone who understood why it begins just north of Las Vegas. This episode feels especially gritty by series standards. For one thing, when Catherine attacks, we see her manhandle her victims without freeze-framing or cutting away from the action. And rather than finding some abandoned place to hide, she integrates herself into the city as a prostitute. The means by which Kolchak initially attempts to slay her is via arranging a meeting through her pimp, and the method he ultimately uses to incapacitate her shows him under an even less flattering light. But this is not even the most distasteful thing that Kolchak does in The Vampire. That would be letting this woman believe that Vincenzo might let her work for him if she agrees to write the story that he's supposed to be reporting on while out of state.
Oh, no, he was really very excited about it. Yeah, he doesn't want to rewrite exactly. He just wants a polish.
Then why was he shouting?
Faye never gets anything from being used, and Kolchak never winds up regretting that he gives her the shaft, which doesn't feel good, but the fact that not everything winds up in a nice little bow is refreshing. As is the general fact that in Kolchak we get to follow a legitimately flawed protagonist who doesn't just have those flaws for the sake of overcoming them. Number 5. The Devil's Platform. In a lot of ways, this feels like the episode in which the series finds its footing. I'd argue the first time it really succeeds outside of the familiar serial murder framework. The Devil's Platform raises the stakes with a plot of the devil meddling in politics, and whether or not there was any intentional cribbing, the Omen trilogy mirrors a lot of this episode's DNA. Most notably its use of a hound as the devil's preferred attack animal, but also the same sort of pre-apocalyptic mood as accidents and bodies begin to pile up in a way that seems to favor one man all too well. The hero in The Devil's Platform is the writing, avoiding lengthy subplots and tangents, with the political focus stoking some of Carl's most sardonic monologues. It also proves to be a topic that Vincenzo is notably not so hard-line on. As long as Kolchak skips anything partisan or dealing with hellhounds. This is probably also the episode with the most legitimately funny banter in it.
Miss Emily brought you that nice new hat, and you insist on wearing that eyesore. Why, Carl?
What don't you like about this hat?
What's under it?
Which is not to say that the A-plot is purely supported by the halo effect. The final conflict with the Satan-backed, Tom Skerritt-played politician has him tempting Kolchak, along with what may be the most in-depth rundown on his character we ever get.
You would like, more than anything, to have the Pulitzer Prize. Though publicly you scorn the very concept of awards, you would like more than anything else to get to New York and work on a major daily paper. You would even like a suede-back chair at your desk. Not leather, suede.
Which Kolchak shuts down in a half-serious, half-dismissive way to let you know that while he may believe in monsters,
Do I have to sign my name in blood?
there are other things he's considerably more skeptical about. While I may not recommend it as your first introduction to Kolchak, I think you should watch it early on if you plan to view the whole series. Number 4. The Energy Eater. the second of 2 episodes of Kolchak to feature a monster who is invisible, but this one does a more than serviceable job of it, and actually comes off looking like a higher budget affair than most others. The Energy Eater centers around a new hospital being plagued with power surges, seismic events, and fatal malfunctions under the shadow of an anteater, bear god. What distinguishes this episode is not just its more cinematic look, but its restraint as well, spending a lot of time on Kolchak just being a reporter and avoiding much of the usual conflict with authority. For one thing, because Vincenzo dips out of the plot early on.
And you always say, one story at a time, Carl, one story at a time.
This is probably the best episode to watch Kolchak getting his story, and most of his contacts here are refreshingly reasonable and grounded.
What if the steel's okay?
What do you want from me?
What if the steel is okay?
Well, then have someone check to see if the geologist goofed.
Yet the lack of pushback Kolchak faces in this case only magnifies his underdog status, as there's no convenient gimmick to slay a god. In one scene, a foreman once trained to be a medicine man is convinced by Carl to try and banish it, but only runs away when faced with its reality, and never gets some hero moment where he summons the courage to try again. Nor does modern technology step up with the surefire solution. Rather, in the next scene, it's revealed bit by bit that our most advanced devices can barely interpret its form.
So that's Match Manito.
Kolchak actually makes a few characters believe in the Energy Eater, but in the end he's still alone, willingly coming closer to death than ever we see him, all for his pride as a newsman. Number 3. The Spanish Moss Murders. The second episode featuring Richard Kiel as the monster, though only his towering frame is immediately recognizable in costume. The Spanish Moss Murders is better off for his being unrecognizable, because part of what makes it so effective is seeing it through a window or in the distance and not being quite able to tell what it is, though his grunts alone are enough to let us know that it's something you would never want to meet in a dark alley. One victim does what a lot of us would probably do upon seeing him, and just walks right along, not even believing that it could be what it looks like until she's being throttled in his arms. Paramal Fate is
The Boogeyman.
the Cajun Boogeyman, and if every story about the plain Boogeyman were as scary, well, we'd probably decide that one was good enough and stick with it. The procedural mystery of its identity and of its origins evolves from a folklore story to a science fiction one in a surprisingly elegant way. Not to mention accidentally providing the best theory as to why the series sees so many supernatural events from disparate origins taking place in Chicago. Because if anyone can dream a monster from folklore into real life, complete with powers, weaknesses, and physical evidence, so can somebody else out there. Paramal Fate also stands apart by being one of a few monsters who becomes aware of Kolchak's presence and goes actively stalking him first.
Ceiling isn't leaking. He's been here looking for me. Paramal Fate's been looking for me.
Something I think is only shared by the doppelganger from Firefall, and number 1 on this list. Number 2. Horror in the Heights. Centering primarily around a dilapidated remote ghetto, Horror in the Heights can boast a few things amidst the series. First off, having an elderly cast of victims, a touch which truly drills in the cruelty of the monster at its center, a Rakshasa that cloaks itself in the illusory guise of its victims' most trusted ones, and then picks them to the bone. It also offers a bitter flavor of class commentary, as the fact that its victims live near rats allows the police to more easily ignore the gruesome circumstances of their deaths and allow the nightly attacks to continue unhindered. There's a desolate feeling underneath the horror here that helps give the episode its identity. Kolchak, being one of a few people willing to genuinely listen to those living in the Heights, allows the Rakshasa to disguise itself as him to a resident at one point.
How did you get around there?
Not around there, I'm around here.
As you can guess, this episode is also home to some of the heaviest tension the Night Stalker has to offer. The cuts between the Rakshasa's human form and its shaggy, hulking true self are expertly timed to maximize dread, leaving you just enough time to realize that you saw something bad, but not quite enough to process what it was. Horror in the Heights will toy with your perceptions more than once, and its finale puts Kolchak's assertion,
"There isn't anyone that I trust,"
to a real test. Number 1. The Zombie. I don't want to be facetious here and say that Kolchak peaked with episode 2, but this episode has the best the series has to offer in terms of what we're here for. It follows Kolchak reporting on the latest killings in a gang war, which have actually been committed by a zombie of the Jason Voorhees persuasion, strong enough to snap a man's spine in his bare hands, and with a habit of returning to the grave between sprees.
This black guy we're gonna schlep? We had him in here last week.
Wait a minute, what do you mean you had him in here last week? Dead?
Adding chaos, Kolchak is also forced to bring a mob brat intern on the job with him, allowing McGavin to have some fun playing him as a dick. And unlike Faye from The Vampire, Monique is abrasive enough to feel like she's kind of earning the stiff shake.
Wait for me!
No!
I'm coming!
Get back, get back!
I'm ready for ready!
The way the episode goes about teasing the zombie's appearance through ambiguous sounds and partial images sets an ominous tone that follows Kolchak throughout the episode, which also presents the series' best human villain in Marie Edmonds, who resurrects her grandson as the zombie. When we first meet her, she puts forward a naturally kooky, benign demeanor, but even without breaking this character, she ends up exuding a strong enough cautionary vibe that you want to join Kolchak in leaving her presence as soon as possible.
Oh, gun! Oh, gosh! I walked.
When the zombie is finally seen, his appearance is ragged but powerful, while Kolchak's ritual to keep him from rising involves needlepoint precision, making this a goated suspense scene, not only by the standards of 70s television, but by horror standards in general. If you're just getting into the Night Stalker, then any one of these would serve as a fine introduction to the series at its best. And if you're unfamiliar with the series, then I hope I've sold you on it over the course of this countdown. As for how the other half of Kolchak holds up, take a look at my bottom 10 episodes as well. Who knows, I may even sell you on one of them. And if you think anything from that list belonged on this one or vice versa, then I want to know why. Please leave me a comment below letting me know your overall favorite episode of Kolchak the Night Stalker. And if you enjoy seeing content like this, please subscribe to our channel and continue to look horror, listen horror, talk horror.